Hi there, this is Kathy from Neurotherapy.online, and in this clinical skills video I'm going to show you how to draw the pattern for a dorsal C-bar splint. If you haven't seen one before, there's a couple of photos here just so that you can see what it looks like. Okie doke, let's get into it. And I always draw a pattern because then I can try it on the client and I can adjust it easily. So the points to mark on here, I mark the middle of the MCP heads, and I also mark the distal palmar crease, because when you're making a functional splint you often want the palmar support to be proximal to that spot, and if you want to provide more support out here and block certain joints, for example if you want to block the MCPs, then you would want the thermoplastic or whatever you're using to come past those joints. So for this one I always mark distal crease and the middle of the MCP heads, and then for the thumb, IP, MCP, CMC. So let's do that. So middle of the MCP heads on both sides, palmar crease, IP, MCP, and CMC. Alright, that's all that. And then for this one you actually need another pattern. So what I usually do is just trace the one I've already done, because often on a client it's harder to keep the hand out nice and straight, isn't it? So I usually just trace the one I've already got. So now I'm going to draw the pattern. I'm going to use a red pen just so you can see it nice and clearly. So the first thing to do is to draw the across from the MCP heads. So you can see that that actually is on an angle because our MCPs are actually on a bit of an angle that way. This one's lower, but you can see that they actually slant down. So this line, if this line is straight on your splint, then there's something wrong because it needs to be on an angle. On this side, you don't need the material to come right over because you're going to have a bar coming through. And if you have too much material on this side, too many thicknesses, it makes it hard to get on. So I just go to the right to the edge there, and you should have, that's a bit too square, needs to be rounded. Then I bring it through to below the CMC, because that's where I'm going to I want it to come down here for cutting, and then I draw out for the forearm piece. Now, people often wonder how thick it should be. So really, you know, when you read in books about it should be half the width. So if you put your pen in the middle of the arm, you would see that perhaps you need, 1.5 centimetres or so, a bit less than an inch width here. And on the forearm, it depends on the size of the person. So you can see for me, probably 2 centimetres. Now up here, you can, well, I always do come over the edge, because on this side, you often want to stop ulnar deviation. So you want some material to come around the side of the hand so that you can support the hand correctly in the splint all the way down, rather than just up here with the bar. If you're trying to stop ulnar deviation with just a bar, then you're going to get pressure for sure. And the bottom must be rounded. That's how you draw the dorsal part for the forearm. Now let's do the C-bar. So what I tend to do is I draw the bar across there because that's where the crease is, and you can make this as big as you like. So if it's a person has a larger hand, then of course you make it a bit wider. I'll make that a little bit wider there, it's a little bit thin. Alright, and you want the C-bar, when it's on the person, that's the bit of the C. It's going to turn into a C from this. When you look at it from the side, it turns into a bit of a C. Can you see that? So that's why we call it a C-bar. And the C is going to fit into the web space like that and support it. So you're just really making a rectangular piece with bars, and it's going to sit like this. Right? If you're looking from the front, it's going to sit like that. And if you're looking from the side, it's going to sit like that. All right. So you can see you make it go up as high as you want it to. If I want to block that MCP, and you often do with people with hypertonicity or spasticity or weakness in their hand, you want to block this joint so that you can force flexion at the PIP in order to get a pinch grasp or a tripod. Okay, so if I wanted to block the index on this one, I would draw my top of my C-bar there, and then I'd bring it down. And of course the width depends again on the person's hand and what you want to cover. So for my hand, if I want to cover the base of the thinner eminence down here, then you want it to cover that side of the thumb, the radial side of the thumb, and come down here onto the thinner eminence. So you can make this part wider or narrower. Usually wider is better. And although I've drawn this one equal width, what I might do on this one is actually draw it wider so that you can see the difference. All right. So I'm getting another coloured pen just so that you can see where I draw this one. Oh, what I should, yeah, okay. So I've said you measure from here to wherever, from the middle of the web space to wherever you want the material to stop, and you measure from the middle of your crossbar up. So if I wanted to come across my MCP head, I'd measure it like that. So I would actually probably make that one a bit longer, like that. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the bottom of the C-bar. So I'm going to measure from the middle of the web space again to wherever I want it on the thumb. So if this person doesn't have an issue with IP flexion, then I can stop the C-bar below the IP. If I want to provide quite a high, I want to control the IP as well, and I want this C part of the splint to go up higher, then I would measure from past the IP. So I measure from the middle of the web space to above the IP, measure from the middle of my bar down to where I think it needs to go, and this one I'm going to make wider to cover the thinner eminence a bit better, or a bit further down. Okay, needs to be rounded. They both need to be rounded. Okay, so that's the C-bar drawn, and this is one cut out. So the one I've just drawn would actually be wider here to cover my C-bar. And I might just cut it out and so that you can see the difference. So these are the two different ones that I've done. You can see that well, it's not actually that much wider. Well, it's a little bit wider. That one's narrower, shorter. So let's have a look. I'll fold those in so they're out of the way. If I put it on the thumb, on my thumb, you can see that it would allow my MCP to flex, and it would allow my IP to flex. See that? Now let's have a look at this one. There we go. Fatter down there, so it supports more of my thinner eminence and comes up higher on my index finger, so you can see it's going to block the MCP head. Cups my web space, and then I would cut it a little bit longer if I wanted it to go over the IP here. Just let me try and show you that again, and you can see that I've covered more of the thin remnants. Okay, all right, so that's that bit. And then here's one I baked before. That's just the dorsal piece. So then, trying this one on, you would have it behind the MCP heads, like that, and you would flare that when you were putting it on the person. You would flare that to make sure that you avoided the MCP heads. You can see that it goes on a slight angle. I could probably make it more of an angle. Let's see. Yep, I could probably make it more of an angle, so let's just... That looks better. Okay, and down the forearm. And it would go over my forearm, over the side, and then avoid this part of my thumb. Okay. Get my C-bar, there it is. We shall put these on. So I'll just take this one. You can see that I've cut the bars round. I'm going to get my C-bar and pebble bit up here for the index. Then I usually overlap these on the back just for strength and stability. So you can see I haven't got it in exactly the right spot. It's hard to do this with paper. Okay, so that's basically how it would look. All right. So that's your dorsal C-bar.